So, hi folks, I'm Jen. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm a tech lead and aspiring architect currently working at ThoughtWorks. Over the next few minutes, I'm going to use the heartwarming story of the most challenging and humiliating experience of my technical career to give you some practical examples of how we can build trust even when we start on the very wrong foot. So some time ago, I joined a new consulting gig. I was just replacing a colleague in a team that had been building a developer platform for almost a year without identifying any initial users of that platform, without releasing a single version of it to production or even non-production. And my goal was to help the team start thinking about their platform as a product and releasing thin slices of value. And I felt really confident about being able to help them do that. However, within the first 2 days at the gig, it became apparent that my joining the team wasn't well communicated. Client tech lead was really unhappy at losing an established team member, and he and his engineering manager were questioning my skills, my experience, my abilities, my value to the team, both publicly and privately. And when I say publicly, I mean in a big showcase with 50 peers and stakeholders. They were highlighting that they weren't happy at my appointment. So it was the worst start to a project I've ever had in over a decade of experience. Second day, both the tech lead I'd be working with on a day-to-day basis and his boss were saying that I was going to be useless, and they'd told the world as much. How was I going to turn that around? I was feeling humiliated, anxious, I had no idea what to do. So unbeknownst to me at the time, I managed it by focusing on the three sides of the trust triangle. There's lots of different variations on this, but the one that we're seeing here, relationships, consistency, and competence, is one that kind of best resonates with how I navigated the situation. So we're going to talk through each of these points. So the first side of the triangle is relationships, and this is the idea that you can trust people when they value you, where they make you feel seen and understood. And what that looks like practically for me is that I always try and have an inclusive, welcoming style to my leadership and my teamwork. And so I brought that to the team anyway. Practically, that looked like getting to know the full team, actively listening, contributing to team-wide sessions, and volunteering to help out without kind of dominating or interrupting their established flows. It meant working really closely with the tech lead and his second in command, proactively asking about their concerns for the project, making sure they knew why I was there, how we were going to achieve our goals together, and letting them know that I needed their expertise as well. And it meant taking an interest in folks personally on a friendlier level. So asking them about their weekends, asking them about their families, remembering key pieces of info and following up on that later. And these seemingly kind of second nature actions that we all, well, most of us probably do, really do contribute to starting to build that trust with other folks. The second side of the triangle is consistency. So this is the idea that to trust somebody, we have to know that they'll follow through on their promises. They'll do what they say they will. And for me, that meant making it very clear about my role in the team, my goals, how they benefit us, and keeping the team up to date on what I was doing. I'd work on tickets in our Jira board, I'd give updates and stand-ups, I'd have playback sessions where I invited the whole team to share what I'd been doing. And I'd also set and meet deadlines for myself. Now, these weren't business deadlines, they weren't hard deadlines set by anybody else, but this was a way for me to iteratively and consistently show the team that I would do what I said I was going to do. By Tuesday, I'll have finished that draft. So on Tuesday, I'd finished a draft. On Wednesday, I'd organise a playback session, and it happened. And I think all of that and doing it iteratively helped build a picture of me of somebody that was reliable and trustworthy. And the last piece of the triangle is competence. And this is the one that I found most difficult to tackle and the one that was most heavily affected by my start at the project. So the team lead and the engineering manager were questioning my credibility and my ability to do the work before I'd even started, and I had no idea how to show them quickly that I was capable of it. And I think my main approach was to use short iterations of those self-imposed deadlines that I just mentioned to work independently, but not in isolation. So the idea is that each of these iterations, I would independently create draft artifacts or put practical changes in place. I'd play that back to the team and get their input and get feedback from them. And I'd effectively be saying, here, I've done this research, I've done this work. You see that I am capable of doing this, but also trying to build that kind of inclusive, team-centered approach. I'd like to hear your thoughts on it. I'd like to get your feedback on it. And I think that doing that over those short periods of time, those kind of regular iterations really helped build my credibility. They could see that I knew what I was talking about, that I knew what I was doing, and it was very quickly kind of building up this picture of me that somebody that was capable. So how do we know that it worked? Well, within a couple of months, we had our first users that were using the platform to deploy their APIs to non-prod environments. So after a year of no releases and no users, this was a major success for the team, which was great. But personally, the biggest indicator that things had changed came at the end of my time on my project, where the client kept extending the date. And the engineering manager, who'd initially been questioning my abilities, asked me if I would take on the role of product owner for the platform. So a complete change from not thinking that I was valuable to wanting me to permanently stay in the team. I didn't take him up on the offer, but I was absolutely delighted to be asked. Looking back, there's certainly things that I could have done differently during my onboarding, but ultimately what I've learned is that you can get a great outcome even when you start from the worst of the worst places. I hope that that's what you take from this too. Thanks, folks. Can stop sharing.
All right. Great talk. Does anybody have like some question for Jen? We have like time for exactly one question. So no. In that case, Jen will be on Slack and you can ask her questions directly there. So the next guest on our list is Patricia Mantley, which will be speaking with us about imposter syndrome and what do you need to do to overcome it. So, hi Patricia, how are you today? You need to unmute yourself.
Again, thank you so much. And to be honest with you, this subject couldn't come better after Jen um, Jen presentation, and I think everybody's going to feel related and also related with how Jen managed what she did. So yes, I'm going to talk about this myth about imposter syndrome, and it's something that I have been hearing a lot lately. But first, let me show you a little bit about myself. I'm not going to read all that, but you can see that I have done a lot of things, which I'm very, very proud. And I'm not bragging about that. It's because I have done all those things, but even with all those things done, I still always feel a little bit like not quite right. So let me get clear about what I'm talking about here. This imposter syndrome is that little voice in your head that says you're not good enough, you don't deserve to be here. It's just a matter of time before they figure it out you don't belong. And probably a lot of us feel about that. But from my point of view, that is totally exhausting. And yet, so many of us, especially women, carrying around with this kind of like an unwelcome shadow that we feel. So let me share a little quick story about me. I have been dealing with all this on my whole career, and no matter what I achieve, I never felt ready for the next step. One day, I was having a chat with one of my boss about why I haven't had applied for a promotion, and I went on and on about how I wasn't quite there yet, how I needed more experience, more skill, more of something. And she stopped me and she said, "Oh, that sounds like you have imposter syndrome." And seriously, I didn't know about that until like 5 years ago, 8 years ago actually. And I actually Googled it behind like, oh, you think? And I was Googling because I didn't know about that. But that work stuck with me because I realized that I have been living in that sort of loop, recognizing the feeling, but never doing anything about it. And that is when I understood what was the real problem. And it was the feeling itself. And that is what was keeping me without change. And once I realized that, everything changed for me. So today, what I'm going to do with you is to break down a little bit of this. And I hope you understand that this is not a disease, and it's definitely something that you don't need to be stuck there forever. And I will show you how to move from the awareness to uncover the real issue and hopefully put yourself into action. So let me show you what is the first step. So the first step, obviously, is recognizing the imposter syndrome. And this is a big step for sure, but it's not enough. And the problem is that we treat it like a permanent condition. And how many of us things like, oh, I can do this because, I have been feeling like imposter syndrome. And it's almost like we were giving ourselves that excuse to keep ourselves in our comfort zone. But the truth is, it's just a labeling that keep us in victim mode. And awareness is the starting line, but definitely is not the finish line. So what can we do about that? So once you recognize the feeling, I think it's time to go a little bit deeper. So the imposter syndrome isn't the real issue, it's a symptom on something else. So here are my 3 questions I want to give you today that might help you to figure it out. What is the root cause of that? So the first one is what I'm actually afraid of. Is that failure? Is judgment? Is not meeting my own expectations? This is a big question that we can ask ourselves. The second one is what story I'm telling to myself. I'm convincing myself that I'm not good enough, even when the evidence say the opposite. And think about every time when you have that story in your head, think about, is this true? Is this 100% true? And if you still think that is true, what evidence do you have in your past that is saying that you're not good enough for this? And the third question is what skills or area do I feel I'm lacking? And then how can I do to start improving it? And these questions can help you to move forward from I'm feeling like an imposter to what is really going on in your life and what you are thinking. And once you know the root cause, you can start definitely fixing it. So what is the cure? And this is the thing, action. So here's when the magic happens. You can't overthink your way out of imposter syndrome. You have to act your way out. So if you're doubting your skills, take a course or ask someone for feedback. If you're afraid of rejection, start small. Speak in a meeting like this one, for example, send that email, raise your hand in one of the meetings, and every action that you do will take you away of that fear and start building your confidence in that area. So for me, my first step was to ask for feedback. Was it scary? Absolutely. But it taught me something very important. And action is what makes the doubts getting quieter and quieter. And obviously, this is not going to be at once, but it's going to be little by little. And let's be honest, staying in analysis mode is just another way to stay stuck in that mode that we have. So action is the only way that you can move forward. Have you ever heard about analysis paralysis? That is what happened. But what about if you look at this also and think about this in a different way? What if feeling like an imposter wasn't a bad thing? What about if you only feel like that when you are stepping out of your comfort zone? So instead of asking yourself, why me? Try to asking, why not me? And these moments of doubt might actually be the sign that you are growing into a better version of yourself. So this is my challenge for you today. Start labeling yourself and start questioning the real issue. Then commit to one action, little one, and keep going one step at a time and watch how those doubts start to disappear. And I like a quote that Maya Angelou say, and I'm going to read that. I have written 11 books, but each time I think, oh, they're going to find out now, and I have run a game on everybody. But even she had doubts, but the difference was she didn't stop. So you don't need to stop either. that is all for me. I hope I did it in the time. And if you go and talk further, you can go into my any of the emails or Instagram or LinkedIn or Facebook. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Patricia. That was an amazing talk, and actually, it sounds like you challenged yourself to be here today. So you're putting in practice exactly what you were talking about. And you did very, very well. So if it helps you fight your imposter syndrome, I couldn't say that that was your first talk at all. Does anybody have any questions to Patricia? No. Okay, so she'll be on Slack if you need anything. So our next guest is Omaim, which will be talking about about chaos engineering, giving us some intro about this. So welcome, Omaim. How are you today?
Hi, thank you very much. I'll share my screen. 1 minute. I think it's this one. Nope, I shared the wrong screen. Yeah, this one. Okay. Can you see my screen? Okay, cool. So yeah. Hi, my name is Umaima, and I currently work at Orange Business. And today it's a bit of a technical talk, unlike the other presentations we've seen. And I want to talk about chaos engineering. So it's an interesting approach to system reliability that might sound kind of counterintuitive at first, because we're actually going to break things on purpose. So in the next few minutes, I'll explain why this is not as crazy as it might sound. So next slide. Okay. So what is chaos engineering? Chaos engineering is a disciplined approach to testing that helps us build confidence in our systems. So think of it like a vaccine to your infrastructure. You introduce small and controlled failures, into your infrastructure to help prevent larger ones. So we do this through a systematic approach to finding weaknesses. We use carefully controlled experiments and isolated experiments and infrastructure. And we learn from each failure we introduce, and ultimately we make our systems more resilient. So this is not about causing random chaos, but it's more about having a thoughtful and curated experimentation. So why chaos engineering? Why would we need this? So currently, modern systems are incredibly complex. They're distributed across multiple regions, multiple servers. Maybe we're using multiple cloud providers, and this complexity means that our failure nodes or points are scattered everywhere, and we cannot simply predict them through traditional testing that our teams create or use. So as you can see in this flow, system complexity leads to unknown failures, which creates a need of more sophisticated testing approaches. And this is where we use chaos engineering. So ultimately, we try to have an improved reliability and customer trust. So we try to be proactive. So instead of waiting for the failure to happen, we actually cause it and be proactive towards that failure to come. Yeah, and we improve the overall reliability of our application infrastructure. So some key principles that we can look at to make chaos engineering effective. So we always start with a steady state, a baseline of normal behavior. How do we want our application to perform normally in our infrastructure? And then we form hypotheses about how our system should behave. And then we introduce real-world events like, what if we have network failures? What if our server crashes? Or we have disk errors or storage errors? And then we carefully observe what happens and how our application or system will react. So we actually gather data to actually see what's going on and gather information to learn from it and prevent it from happening in the future. And most importantly, we minimize the blast radius or explosion radius because we, again, have to keep our experiments to be contained and isolated and safe. So you kind of think of it as a scientific method for an experimentation or something like that, but inside infrastructure. A few famous examples of some major tech companies that are already doing this. There are Netflix, for instance, that created Chaos Monkey, which randomly terminates instances in production. We have Amazon with Game Day, where they simulate major failures during peak shopping seasons, for instance. Google, who runs DIRT, disaster recovery testing exercises, and Facebook that uses Storm to test their infrastructure. So these companies have proven that controlled chaos makes systems stronger. So if you're interested in getting started, here's how to begin. So first things first, you should start small. So begin with a single service in development. Don't jump straight into production. Again, safe and isolated. You define your metrics, so you know what success or like how do we have that check, like how is it good, how do you identify that your application is actually resilient against a certain failure. So you set up clear SLOs, for instance, or metrics to measure your impacts. And then you automate. So once you're confident, you can automate your chaos experiments with continuous testing or scripts that you can inject in your various environments. And eventually you can move on to production to actually see how your system begins to be resilient even in production during runtime. So again, you remember the goal is to start simple and gradually increase complexity as you gain confidence. Yeah, and that's it. Thank you very much. I hope you gain an introduction about what is chaos engineering and might get you started into it.
That was amazing, Omeima. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I have a question of my own, but I'll other people ask questions. So does anybody have a question for Omeima?
Nelson and Alex have got questions.
So yeah, go for it.
I'll put mine in because it should be quick. You are saying do this in production, aren't you? This is
in the future, once the goal is to have a system that is resilient even in production. So you start with a contained environment, but eventually if you prove yourself that your system is resilient in other environments, you can actually start implementing these experiments in production, and you can witness how a resilient your system begins to behave or shows up as resilient.
Thanks very much. Don't know who else had a question.
Nelson?
Hi, Omain. Hi. Good afternoon, Omain. That was really good. My question, my question is this. It seems as though, this is suitable for a microservices environment, right? Like an environment where you have, a lot of your services in different regions and things like that. So my question is this. Is this something that an engineering team can try in a non-microservices environment? And if so, how would that work?
So if you're talking about trying this for a monolithic kind of architecture, we haven't tried this because because the actual need, like how did it occur to us to actually use chaos engineering, is because of the microservices infrastructure or architecture, sorry. But yeah, I think it's always possible to actually have it for monolithic architectures, because it goes down to it boils down to like some scripts that may cause, like for instance, memory killing, like the OOM failures. You can use that as well, like scripts that would use your memory or excessively or something like that. And you can just run these scripts in your, I don't know, for instance, if you have your application in cluster, a Kubernetes cluster, for instance, you can run that scripts or cron jobs, and they would just cause the failures of the pods. And this might actually give you an idea of your failure points in your environment, even though it's a kind of monolithic architecture.
Right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So Robert had a question in here. What kind of problems did you find in the controlled environment?
Yeah. Oh, okay. So the starting point was the OOM killing, like the memory leaks that we had in all our testing environments. So we started with this issue. Other than that, there were like some like databases that you might need to make sure that it's always up and running, so you don't have data leaks or something like that. So testing for Kafka pods, for instance, these were very interesting to actually have them tested in our controlled environments. The deployments are actually very similar in a controlled environment or as a non-controlled, aka production. But yeah, if you can actually see all the issues or failure points that you have inside of a controlled environment, you can actually solve your issue in production most of the time.
Thank you. So Carly has typed a question here as well. So she's basically asking if you have like specific technology to trigger like specific types of issues, you know, like slowdowns and things like that, or you're just like creating scripts and calling this with Chaos Monkey or whatever other tool.
So mainly I use scripts. I actually see what triggers the issue and try to reproduce it through scripts. But I've been exploring like Chaos Monkey that is offered by Netflix. There's also Gremlin. It's also, I find it very interesting. I started to look into it recently. But yeah, there's a lot of services and tools actually used for that. I'm currently exploring it as well.
Okay, so the last question is my own. I think that there is a little bit of a curveball when implementing chaos engineering, because is this a responsibility of the dev team or like the SRE platform team or somebody else? And then like it's always you know, who takes care of this? Do you have any hints to navigate when you're starting this kind of effort?
Yeah, so we actually started it with the DevOps teams. I am a DevOps and software, so I know like what are the issues that we run into in our environments. And I start to like list the issues that we have in our controlled environments and testing environments, and then I try to like test them for the system to be more resilient in our testing environments. So it's actually a DevOps effort, I would say. You know, you need the devs to actually help you find and pinpoint the failures and any struggles they might have when they're testing their application in the environment. So for now, it's a DevOps effort in my case.
Oh, all right. Well, this is for Slack lately, but yeah, Alex had exactly what has on my mind. So how do we get devs and the product devs involved into this, so not passing the bucket around to devs forever? But let's save it for later because I want folks to join Slack as well. So, Omeima, that was a brilliant presentation. You can see that you got lots of questions. So great topic, great talk. It was fantastic. So our next guest is Shushita Prasad, which is going to give us a talk about turning weaknesses into strengths. And I never worked with FMEA before, so this is going to be a very interesting one. So welcome, Shushita.
Hi all. Am I audible?
Yep.
Okay. Is my screen visible? Okay. Hi all. My name is Shuchita Prasad, and today I'm going to talk about failure mode effect analysis. And because we are, having a Christmas theme, so I'm going to discuss about this process from Santa's Gift Delivery Edition. So the Santa is supposed to deliver the gifts. What can go possibly wrong? Apologies, I think my slideshow is not working. So coming back to our Santa gift delivery process, what can all go wrong? maybe the sledge can have a malfunction, the gifts can be delivered to the wrong children, or even our reindeer can, develop fatigue. So that's where our failure mode effect analysis and industry-wide process already followed in automobile manufacturing and a lot of other industries can help us here. So just going back to the previous topic, even before deciding what could be your, what exactly to test, this standard process essentially, I hope the Excel sheet is visible. Can anybody confirm?
Yes.
Okay, so this is a standard template where we list down the process or the functions which we are going through. So going by our example, anything related to packing in our sleigh. So what can basically go wrong in this process? So the wrong gift packing can happen, which can eventually lead to what would be the effect? A child can receive the wrong gift. So a 12-year can get a gift of a 5-year-old. How severe is the problem? It is kind of severe, with a higher rating being more severe and a lower rating being less severe. And identifying the potential cause of the failure, mislabeling of the gift packages. How likely is this failure going to happen? Is it very high or very low? If it is low, then the rating would be on the lower side. And if it is high, it will be in the range of 1 to 10. What are the current controls to avoid these failures? So else we'll double check the label. And how easy or hard it is to detect. If it is very high, very difficult to detect, the rating goes again high. Out of these 3 ratings, which we give, severity, occurrence, and detection, we basically get risk priority number, which is the product of all 3. So against a particular failure, I find the risk priority number, which is a product of severity, occurrence, and detection. And this will, if a higher score, that means this is a failure scenario, which is very highly likely and very crucial for my application. What's the recommended action? Well, we should go ahead and use a barcode or a scanning system which automates the process rather than the manual effort involved. The second scenario could be our sleigh malfunctions. And, again, we go ahead and, rate this, and eventually our risk priority number is 60. So as I showed the example of gift delivery system, what we understood that these are my point of failures in the whole process. I listed them down. I clearly listed the failure modes, what would be the effect, and eventually I found out what are the highest or the most crucial scenarios of failure for me, along with the recommended action. So this is a process which we can follow even in our software industry as well. So coming back, as already discussed, this is something which is being followed across the industry, and we can also apply in software industry. I'm taking a very generic example of a 3-tier application, irrespective whichever cloud, wherever you deploy. So now we will go ahead and do the failure mode effect analysis of this particular architecture. So the use case is we have got users who click on the UI, the presentation layer, which calls our app layer. The app layer will go ahead and make a vendor call. So the use case is the user want to fetch or view the product details. And later on, based on the product details, they will go ahead, select one of them, and we might save in the database and take the order. So that's a very generic use case of our application. Now, as we saw the failure mode effect report of the gift delivery process, let's go ahead and see a few scenarios of our failure scenarios of the 3-tier architecture. So the first process is fetch product and cost details. So the flow is the user clicks on the UI, the app layer is called, the app layer makes a call to the vendor to fetch the product details, the cost details. So what all could go wrong over here? So one of the potential errors could be at this layer where the vendor API call fails. Now, what could be the potential, what's the failure mode? So we have got a rate limiting defined on the vendor level. What could be the effect? The customer cannot view the product because vendor itself gives, the product details. What's the severity? It is high. And what could be the potential cause of high traffic due to festival season or offers being on the product? Occurrence can be high because of the upcoming festival season. Current controls, timeouts are defined on the REST API call, and monitoring and alerting are already in place. Detection, easy to detect. So the rating is 4, and that severity, occurrence, and detection gives me a rating of, the product gives me a rating of RPN. What's the recommended action? We should go ahead and implement a circuit breaker at this layer so that we do not overwhelm the other layers. And once our application is up and running, then we go ahead and recover. At the same time, we should have a discussion with vendor because we know our expected traffic. Can the rate limiting be increased? Similarly, the second scenario which we will talk about is fetch the so after viewing, fetch the product cost and details, the same flow, but the failure mode could be slow and unreliable vendor authentication. So assuming there is an OAuth authentication between the business logic app layer and the vendor, and the auth server is taking a lot of time for the authentication to take place. So this leads to a bad user experience. Severity is pretty high, but occurrence is pretty low. Why? Because our current control is we have alerting raised on any whenever we have authentication time running very high. And our auth server has already been perf tested with the expected load. So because of all these reasons, this rating comes out to be low. So essentially, what this process forces developers, designers, everybody, or the team to think is designed for failure, developed for failure. And this is based on the shift left approach, where you can preempt your failure scenarios. So that's all. This is a regular reoccurring cycle where through that standard template, what we identify, we follow all these steps. And it's a cyclic action. When we have taken the recommended action, we again evaluate, does the RPN go down? So the key benefits, what we observe out of this process is definitely reduction in defects and incidents, reduce cost, going by the principle that any defects caught early on in the design of the development phase they lead to a lower cost as compared to normally going ahead and discovering them on the production side. And it is also helps in following the design for failure principle. What are the risks if we follow this FMEA process? If we go ahead and miss failure scenarios, then we will also miss the recommended action or the testing of them using whether Gremlin or Kiosk or whatever tools. The mitigation to this would be that this process expects that when we go ahead and do the scenarios, we have a cross-team collaboration where SREs, dev, and the infrastructure team, everybody is invited, and we identify all the scenarios. Sometimes we might overestimate the risk, and it is a complex and time-taking process. So in short, I would like to leave you all with a thought process that do not be afraid of failures. Go ahead, analyze it, and follow the FMEA process to mitigate it, to be more confident about your applications. Thank you.
Great talk, amazing. I I have questions on my own again, but I'll first open to the room. Like, does anybody have a question about for Omema? Nope. Okay. Oh, Nelson, go ahead.
Well, Ben, again, that was good. That was really good. Again, like the other speaker, it seems to me that this works again in a microservices environment, correct?
Actually, no. While I'm just sharing experience of our team. Yes, we started our journey because we were moving to cloud. Systems were very complex, but FMEA is essentially can be evaluated even in monolithic circumstances, where even in monolithic you have multiple points of failure. So this is as a process where you basically analyze your design, irrespective whether monolithic or microservices, understand your point of failures and evaluate the risk for that application.
Right, and this is applicable to with smaller teams.
So basically, it depends how the working model is based on. For us, it is a combination of the dev team as well as the SRE. For the smaller teams who are responsible for the infrastructure as well as the app development, they themselves can go ahead and create it. But it totally depends on the working model. For smaller teams, they themselves can go ahead and create it. But if there is infrastructure or SRE teams involved, then we should have a cross collaboration for not missing out the scenarios.
Right. Okay. Thank you so much.
Alex, you had a question as well?
Less of a question, more of an observation. As I understand it, that spreadsheet was kind of the columns were defined by the FMEA process. That you're nodding. So I didn't quite grasp that at first, and so my the one thing I would like to help me if I was seeing this for the first time is to get that life cycle page first before, and then realize that each of those steps was like another few columns in the spreadsheet. Because my gut reaction is you're trying very hard to show us this spreadsheet, and I don't know whether it was necessary, but I guess it's the fundamental tool that you're describing. So yes, it was. So not a very good question, more of an observation. Sorry.
Thank you. Thanks for that valuable feedback.
Thank you for the talk.
I just have a question on my own. I learned something new. I didn't know that failure mode and effective analysis was an official thing. But I think like on architecture, most of us did something similar. So at least in big finances, big investment kind of, you and I worked for the same companies in the past, right? And like, so in architecture, we had something called risk registry, which is basically the same idea. And it was an attempt of mine and other architects to like call attention to like big technical issues and try to get it prioritized for like upcoming sprints and efforts and things like that. But if I'm going to be totally honest, it wasn't very successful in the sense that, yeah, business had they knew about it, but I still couldn't prioritize technical debts and problems in the software. So maybe bad question, but how successful were you with FML to actually get those risks prioritized by business?
So I think the company culture definitely helps if it comes from top down, like it is not an option, because what we have observed, I mean, maybe and others can pitch in over here, as we have made our journey to microservices and cloud. As an app dev, as an architect, my challenges have increased 10 times. So at least for us, it is something which is coming from top to bottom, where you have to go ahead and follow it. Initially, we got a lot of pushback teens had a lot of crying that it takes a lot of time, very complex, but eventually they will see the benefits when you know, identify, okay, these are the n number of failure points I didn't even know, because we were starting new towards the cloud journey.
That makes a lot of sense. Alex, did you have another question, or was the...
I'm busily typing it away. I was just there's lots of synchronicity between this and the chaos engineering talk, because fundamentally the FEMA analysis would look at ideally all the potential failure modes, and then you could actually introduce those failure modes with chaos engineering.
That's true.
And there's no point doing chaos engineering without actually understanding what things might go wrong. And my comment for Anthony is, everybody seems to think they can do without architecture, and then it all goes wrong. If you just if you totally ignore architecture, it's not a good thing. All right, but thank you again for the talk.
Fair enough. So I just want, since we still have a few minutes left, I want to do two things. First, we were not very fair with our first speakers, because finally folks are like happy asking questions. So if anybody has a question to Jan, Patricia, or anybody else, that's the time to ask. And then Carly has a message for the group as well. So any questions to Patricia, any questions to Jan? I have a question then. Patricia, let me ask you something. In terms of like mental health, market downturns are horrible. And what I often hear from people is, okay, you get amazing feedback and everything is fine, and then on the next day it isn't, right? So in a way, this feeds up your imposter syndrome, because like, how can you trust the feedback that other people give to you in such a scenario? Do you have any hints on like how to like tackle imposter syndrome in your current a horrible market scenario at the moment?
I think it all depends who are you asking feedback, right? If you ask feedback just to your friends, to very good friends, or your colleagues that, you know, go to the pub with you and that kind of thing, obviously you're going to hear good things, I hope so. But it's really be honest and then ask also to those people that maybe are not as friendly for feedback. And that is the thing. And also is, what is the definition of feedback? I read a book, I don't remember the name now, but it was very interesting to understand feedback as the opinion of someone else about something that you did. So if you put feedback as the opinion of someone else, but not who you are, so then you separate yourself of affecting you personally. So you take the feedback like, I'm listening what you're saying, and then I need to review either I'm not giving, because you are my audience, let's put it that way. You are the people that I want to approach, sell, or to are my stakeholder. It's kind of like, I'm probably not giving you the information that you need in the way that you need. So let me understand what you need, right? How can I present myself so then you get it? Or taking into consideration as also an observation and say, am I really that? Do I really need to improve on that? But detaching yourself from the person outside, because that is what affecting you here, that you start thinking, I'm not good enough. But if you think it in a different way, like it's just feedback, it's just an opinion on someone else, you can review that. But you need to be honest. And sometimes what is difficult is to really be honest with ourselves. And then we don't want to actually ask ourselves, you know that you're not good at that. And it happened to me a lot in the past. And once I was like, Patricia, but you know that you could do better on that one. And you're like, oh yes, it's true. So I actually I was grateful by that feedback after, you know.
Yeah, after the settle. I
They're
understand.
like, okay, let
It's
me
kind
think
of
about what they say.
It's the counter side of like radical candor, is actually being able to receive like this radical candor yourself. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So, Carly, do your thing.
Well,
Last talk of the year.
I will, just as my neighbor starts drilling. So if you can hear that, I do apologize profusely.
No, we can.
I just wanted to say thank you to all of our fab speakers. It takes a lot of nerve and a lot of courage to sit in front, even on Zoom, and speak to people and present. So well done, honestly. They were all amazing talks and a great way to finish 2024. We are partnering with Devoxx UK next year to do the aspiring speakers slot again. So it takes place on the Friday morning, and it is an opportunity to do a lightning talk in real life in London in front of people, a live audience. If you are interested, Anthony has put the form inside of the chat. We'll also put it out on the Slack channels as well. If you've done a talk today, if you're wanting to do a talk in January, even if you've not done a talk before, please do apply. We've got some fantastic mentors lined up to try and help each of the speakers with anything from guidance to practice to handling nerves, all those kind of things that really do make it hard to speak in front of a live audience and a live technical audience as well. So if you're interested, please do fill out the Airtable form. Myself and Anthony will be going through the submissions. Normally we end up with more submissions than slots, but we will notify you irrespective because we try to balance it with the topics as well. If you have any questions, no such thing as a silly question, just reach out to myself and Anthony as well, and we'll be happy to help you out. And yes, thank you very much again.
That's it then, guys. Happy holidays. Thank you again for everything. I know that there was a lot of demand to this specific event. We are going to have another one on the 28th. So just fill the other form, if you want to give a talk on the 28th. And that's a great way to be considered for the Devoxx, the Devoxx pathway as well. So yeah, do both. Why do just one of them? All right. Cheers. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.